Right.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the fourth Friday from the Archives. We are glad that you've joined us. This presentation will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, Georgia Archives. I'm Penny Cliff, the Education Specialist at the Georgia Archives. Today, our presentation is Centuries of Fascinating Stories in Georgia History, Investigating the Collections and Other Resources at the Georgia Archives. Now, the focus is going to be on friendships and family, the human connections during historic moments in Georgia's history, or that play a significant part in the outcome of our history. If you've not been to the archives before, you see the photographs on your screen at the very top. That's the Georgia Archives. We have the Georgia flag in front of us because the National Archives is right next to us. If your GPS takes you to the back parking lot, you're going to have to go down that pathway there to the left. So we really hope that you'll visit us. Let's start off with friendships. Okay, this right here is the founding of Georgia was in 1733. As you see, here is a 1734 map of Savannah. For our stories, we're going to start at the beginning of the founding of the colony of Georgia. Okay, the founder of Georgia, James Oglethorpe, had two important friendships which directly influenced the founding and growth of the colony of Georgia. Now, it could be argued that without these friendships, there may not have been a colony of Georgia as we know it today. We'll let you decide that. It's like the what-ifs of history. James Oglethorpe was a visionary. He was a social reformer. He was a military leader. He was really a great guy. In 1722, he was elected to British Parliament in the House of Commons. He was instrumental in an effort for British prison reform, and we'll get into how he got into that in just a second. Oglethorpe wanted to create a colony for those in debtor's prison and the worthy poor. This was a classless crime. Why? We're going to go into that. But first of all, what were debtors' prisons? They were not very nice places. Persons who were unable to pay a court-ordered judgment would be incarcerated in these prisons until they'd worked off their debt by labor or secured outside funds to pay the balance. The product of their labor went towards both the cost of their incarceration, and that meant food, that meant bedding, that meant everything, and their accrued debt. In England during the 18th and 19th centuries, 10,000 people were imprisoned for debt each year. Now think about this. You're struggling to pay your bills and you get thrown into debtor's prison, and all of a sudden you have to pay for prison, you have to pay for food. It was just a terrible, terrible place to be. And it wasn't just the poor either. Just to let you know, it wasn't until 1869 that the Debtors Act brought an end to debtors' prisons in the United Kingdom. You know, over 100 years later, Charles Dickens would be writing about this. So here we have, and I like this image of Oglethorpe. This is from the Digital Library of Georgia. Some of the information you will learn is from other places other than the Georgia Archives, but with each person we're going to go into, we will see sources that can be used or found at the Georgia Archives. And we welcome you to come and investigate for yourself. So this is a young Oglethorpe. So why was the founding of the colony of Georgia so important to James Oglethorpe? It has to do with a friendship. It has to do with a friend's death. James Oglethorpe and Robert Castell were friends. Robert Castell was an architect. He was a very good architect. What you see right here is a frontispiece of the villas of the ancients. He ended up in debtor's prison. Debtor's prison, as we said before, was a classless crime. You know, when you think of debtor's prison, sometimes the image that comes up to mind is you think about poor people that are really struggling, but that's not the case. Even those in higher societal echelons would end up in debtor's prison if they overextended themselves. And this happened to Robert Castell. The picture that you're seeing on the right is from public domain. That is the Fleet prison, and that is where he ended up. Oglethorpe, his friend, was 33 years old. He went to go visit his friend when he found out that he was in debtor's prison. Now, he'd been to several different areas, Robert had, and the warden of the prison, Thomas Bainbridge, he was absolutely corrupt. He took bribes, all sorts of things. He was really just an unpleasant person. So what he did was he took Castell and he decided to put him in this cell where previously somebody had smallpox. Well, what happened was Robert Castell begged the warden, said, please don't put me in here. If you put me in here, I will die. You will be a murderer. And he told this to his friend, and what did the warden do? He stuck him in there anyway. And what happened to Robert Castell? He died. He did. James Oglethorpe had a heart, and he was furious. Well, he was a member of Parliament, and he decided to do some investigating. Not only investigating, but he wanted to hold the warden accountable. So there was a committee put together to investigate prisoners. What this committee, parliamentary committee, found was that once these are debtors, these aren't murderers, these aren't people that have committed terrible, terrible crimes. Once in jail, they were subjected to terrible conditions. Many of them died of starvation, or because they weren't hurt, they were just sick. It was just a very, very bad place to be. This is kind of an interesting print right here. He's either called Thomas Bainbridge or Banbridge. He was on trial for murder by the Committee of the House of Commons. This print shows several members of the House, including James Oglethorpe. There's that little circle right there. I think there's him right there. Actually talking to prisoners and finding out about the brutal treatment. The prisoner whom is in the center is wearing a punishment device known as the collar, and it fits around the neck and one or more hands. Another device is held by Oglethorpe, it's called a skull cap, and it could be tied to the wall so it would remain standing. It was pretty awful. You probably want to know what happened to Bainbridge. He was tried for murder, and he was acquitted twice. And I don't know what happened to him after that. So this is in the paper right here. This was mentioned in the paper. This is in the Daily Post, 1728. Having mentioned in our paper of Tuesday last, the oppressions and miseries that Mr. Castell, a debtor in the Fleet, since deceased, suffered there through the cruel dispositions of his creditors, we hear since that there are now in the Poultry Compter, now that's a smaller prison, 120 confined debtors, most of whom are languishing for want, and some for time past. Numbers have died through indigences or tedious confinement, so that the survivors, their family, have no other hope left other than the legislature would consider their deplorable condition and pass an act for their relief to help the families of those who have passed away. So as we saw in the last slide, Oglethorpe had tried to get justice for his friend Robert Castell. And this 1728 newspaper article shows the investigation led to an act for the relief of families whose loved ones had died in prison. This is where the idea for the colony of Georgia came. So James Oglethorpe's reason and other like-minded friends wanted to have a refuge for indebted prisoners and the worthy poor. Now, keep in mind, not looking at this from where we are today, the culture at the time, it was a time of something called social Darwinism. Social Darwinism posits that the strong see their wealth and power increase, while the weak see their wealth and power decrease. So you reward strength and punish weakness. The poor or those struggling were viewed as, well, it's your own fault. We don't need to help you. But there were those like Oglethorpe and some of his friends who wanted to do something. So he's thinking, let's find a colony. What we're going to do. So the reasons for founding a colony. First, they had to win over Parliament. And they were members of Parliament. And then they had to win over King George II. So how do you do that? So he conceived the colony of Georgia to help people. But as we've looked at it during that time, that's not enough. What can we do to, bring profit to the country? So, okay, let's have a refuge for indebted prisoners, but there's more. So, let's establish a new colony to protect South Carolina from the Spanish invasion, from Florida, and from Indians. We could do that. We can protect South Carolina. Another reason was economic reasons. They hoped that Georgia would be able to produce wine, rice, silk, and indigo. So all of these things are trying to get the new colony. And then there's one other reason, a place of refuge for Protestant refugees to escape persecution. And did it work? Yes, it did. One of the things that you can look up in our virtual vault, go to our website, click on Virtual Vault. In the search bar, just put in Royal Charter and this will come up. You have the Royal Charter of 1732. So it did work. It details Georgia's settlement and the rules for the colonists. Remember what this goes back to? It goes back to Oglethorpe's friend and what he saw in prisons. That's what he wanted. This right here, you see the G and the R. The G is for George, the second R is Rex, it means King, King George. So it worked, it worked. The colony of Georgia was run by trustees for 20 years. It ended a year early, but that's a whole other story. So there was a trust. There's an unspecified number of trusts if you look at the charter. Who would govern the colony from England. The only member of the trust who went to the colony of Georgia was, guess who? James Oglethorpe. 70 men served as trustees during the lifetime of the trust. Their motives were humanitarian. So if you see right up here at the top right seal, that says not for self, but for others. So there were 15 members of council that would meet to vote on to transact business. And Oglethorpe had decided he would come to the colony, set it up, and then go back to England. Well, that's not what happened. He ended up spending a lot more time than anticipated because he had to work things out and his heart was there. Initially, the colony was conceived through private donations. This didn't work out. So 90% of the British government paid for the colony, and then you had private donations. The colonies, actually, it did not work out to have people from debtors' prisons come because you needed to have the colony established people who knew how to farm and had other skills, so that didn't work out. Let's go into another friendship. Once again, it's James Oglethorpe. So we have the death of Robert Castell led to James Oglethorpe to investigate the prison system and come up with an idea for the colony of Georgia. There is another very important friendship that James Oglethorpe established with the Yamacraw chief, or Maiko, Tomochichi. This friendship gave security to the colony and established initially, as we know in the colony's beginnings, a good relationship with Native Americans and colonists, and we know that will change. But let's talk about this really important friendship. Arriving in Georgia, here we have Savannah. James Oglethorpe selected the Yamacraw Bluff because Tomochichi was part of the Yamacraw tribe, which had been part of the lower creeks. They struck up a very strong reciprocal friendship, and that actually helped the colony survive because of the friendship of these two very important individuals. Tomochichi did not speak English, but he needed a translator. But despite that, they became really, really good friends. Tomochichi was a negotiator with other Indians in the very young colony. Now, keep in mind that the colony was not strong, and they didn't want to antagonize the Spanish in Florida. What you're seeing right here is from the transactions of the trustees of Georgia, which we have here, and you can look up if you come and visit. This is actually on our virtual vault. This right here says that Tomochichi's tribe of Indians appeared not so tractable as formerly. Formed of the making preparation with the Creek Nation to fall upon the Florida Indians who were in amity friendship with the Spaniards, but Tomochichi would prevent it. What is important about this? This is 1739. Remember, the colony was established in 1733. What's going on here? It's not a strong colony. This is something similar, but it puts a little bit more in there. This is the Colonial Records of Georgia, Volume 6, which are transcribed here. Take a look at this. It says right here basically the same thing. There was going to be an attack of the Florida Indians. In order to some were already advanced southward towards them, and that they should come to open hostility. It would not be easy to persuade Spain into a belief that the English had no hand in it. So this is another source. The mutual respect and friendship between Tomochichi and Oglethorpe, and the respect that other Native Americans had for Tomochichi helped to avoid a confrontation with Spanish Florida. I took a picture right here. These are the colonial records. They're transcribed in our reference library. You can come to the archives and look at them. There's an index. You can look up all sorts of things. But unlike a library, the books in the archives cannot be checked out. But there's a lot of them. They're just fascinating. This right here is Tomochichi and his nephew, Tunahowie. He adopted his nephew. He's the nephew, but his adopted son. So Oglethorpe sought advice and counsel of Tomochichi, leader of the Yamacraw tribe. Not only that, the tribes were skilled in hunting and fishing and the cultivation of their corn and beans, melons, fruits. So that helped the colonists as well. Both Tomochichi and Oglethorpe had great respect, exceptional negotiators. Tomochichi was a mediator and a diplomat. Oglethorpe was so involved in the colony that he really was not sending a lot of letters back, and some of the other trustees were getting really kind of ticked off at him. He couldn't afford that because he needed them to work towards getting money from the Parliament for the colony. So this is what he did. Brilliant move for both of them. In 1734, Tomochichi, his wife Sanuki, their nephew, and 6 Lower Creek tribesmen accompanied Oglethorpe on a trip to England. This is good for both of them. For Oglethorpe, he wanted the trustees to say, hey, we're strengthening alliances here. Never mind about the letters that I'm not sending, we're strengthening alliances. And for Tomochichi is what he wanted fair trade policies with the English, because some of the traders in South Carolina were really kind of taking advantage. And he also wanted assurances that they would have education for his people, particularly in the Christian religion. So they went, South Carolina headed to England. They were there 6 months. This right here you see on the left, the Isle of Wight. Oglethorpe's estate was on the Isle of Wight. He had Tomochichi and the delegation stay on his estate. Didn't have to do that, but that shows the strength of the relationship, the respect and the friendship there. At the visit, they were there 6 months. They were presented to the Georgia trustees, to Parliament, to the King and Queen of England, the Archbishop of Canterbury. The translator, probably John Musgrove, was the translator. You have right here an eagle, which is a symbol of peace and diplomacy. There were lots of gifts given back and forth. It was highly successful. This right here is talking about the Indians attended, the goods which they deal in. He's talking about, Tomochichi said, look, I paid 10 pounds of leather for a blanket at Yamacraw. He's saying that's exorbitant. He wanted them to deal with that, saying we want fair trade practices. This right here is difficult to see, but what it's saying in the colonial records that we have here, it's talking about anytime there was an answer either from the king or the trustees, there was a stamp put on there saying this is correct. I love this right here. Right in the middle wearing the black garments is James Oglethorpe, and he is presenting Tomochichi and other Yamacraw Indians to the Georgia trustees. This is July 3rd, 1734. Look carefully at this picture. In the back on the right-hand side, you see Tomochichi's wife. So she's not in traditional Native American garb. She's wearing like a European dress. Well, that would be because Tomochichi was sort of brilliant. He knew that it would be offensive for her to show too much skin. So he was a good negotiator. He knew how to present themselves. So, and there is his son right there, his nephew, his adopted son right there. I talked about bringing presents back and forth. This was kind of fun. These are in the colonial records. This is volume 1. It says receive 25 buckskins, 1 tiger skin, 6 buffalo skins, the benefaction of Tomochichi of Yamacraw. What on earth is a tiger skin? So I contacted a colleague and looked it up online, and let me show you this. This is in another place. This is in a general account of monies and effects received and expanded by the trustees. This is another book that we have. It says right here, left by him, Tomochichi Micah, which is chief of the Yamacraw, left by him at the trustee's office on his going from England as a token of friendship to subsist between the people and the people of Georgia. This idea of friendship, it was because of the relationship between Tomochichi and Oglethorpe. What does he get? Here we go. 25 buckskins, 1 tiger skin, and 6 buffalo skins. So I found this online. That would be the tiger. What the tiger is, the elusive American panther. Because American panthers were so elusive, the gift of 1 tiger skin was a very valuable gift. Okay, Tomochichi's ready to go home. He's been there 6 months. He's a negotiator and a diplomat, and he's been wined and dined, and everybody's looked out for him. So as a diplomat, you don't want to say, well, I'm ready to go home now. So what he did was he said this, and it says right here. He said to the trustees, he says that those travelers of the country are all entertained without expense. Excuse me. He is sensible that while they stay in England, they must be a charge to the trustees, basically saying, I know it's costing you money to look after us, which is true. It's brilliant. And the cold weather is coming, and he is desirous of returning home. That before he goes, and then he goes into talking, he wants to talk about trade. So he's saying, I'm getting ready to go. I want to deal with the trade here. He was a great diplomat. You'll see, just like this right here are the colonial records. Of course, Palace Court, these are the trustees and meeting. The names always change. It's like any other meeting. People, there are people that come, not everybody comes, some people come. But at the bottom of this, here we go, gifts again, gifts back and forth. Received 3 tubs of vines, probably grapevines, and 10 dozen of Burgundy wine made by Mr. Charles King of Brompton, as a present from the said Mr. King to Tomochichi. Presents back and forth. And in one of the books, if you're interested in what presents went back and forth, it'll tell you how much they're worth. Very interesting. A few years later, Tomochichi died, October the 5th, 1739. His death really is an example of how deep the friendship was with James Oglethorpe and the respect held to Tomochichi. Oglethorpe held a military funeral to honor the chief, and his grave was marked with a pyramid made of stones, which has since disappeared. In 1899, Nellie Gordon with the Colonial Dames of America secured a new permanent monument. Historians think that Tomochichi was probably 95 years of age when he died. So he was up there when he went to England. This will really show you how, at the beginning of the colony, Native Americans and the colonists were at peace with each other, and how the friendship between these two men affected this. This right here is talking about the death. Right here. Worth noting was the death of the old Maiko Tomochichi, said to be upwards of 90 years of age. And as the general always esteemed him as Oglethorpe, esteemed him as a friend of the colony, and therefore showed him particular marks of his esteem when living, so he distinguished him at his death, ordering his corpse to be brought down, and it was buried in the center of one of the principal squares, the general being pleased to make himself one of his pallbearers with 5 others, among whom he laid his commands on me to be one, and the other 4 were military officers. At the depositing of the corpse, 7 minute guns were fired, and about 40 men in arms, as many as could instantly be found, gave 3 volleys over the grave, which the general says he intends to dignify with some obelisk or the like over it, as an ornament to the town and as a memorial to the Indians. How great regard the English would pay to all their nations who maintain true friendship with us. Kind of listen to that last sentence there. All nations who maintain true friendship with us. There was a friendship there, and we all know that that would change later, but at the very beginning it was different. This is something else in the records of Georgia, volume 5. It talks about there was a monument that came, and it was £2,000, and the trustees wanted to be paid back for it from the government. So, where to find information on General Oglethorpe at the Georgia Archives? Go into the research library, have things like the transactions, the trustees of Georgia, the colonial records. I want to show you something. Went into the index, looked up Oglethorpe. This is just some of it. I mean, you can look up like General Oglethorpe, Oglethorpe, Colonel Oglethorpe, and all of this information would show you what he was involved in the colony of Georgia and the type of person that he was. So if you're interested in colonial records, we have some very interesting sources. One of the things that I want to bring to point is we do have a YouTube channel, and if you want really more detailed information on the founding of Georgia, an excellent YouTube is the Migration and Settlement in Early Georgia. This video by Dr. Henry Miller, a colleague of ours here. Also, there is another one, an overview, which is Colonial Georgia by Mr. Robert C. Jones. So just go to YouTube, plug in Georgia Archives, and if you're interested, listen to those. You're going to learn a lot. Okay, let's fast forward. Georgia and the American Revolution were still in friendships here. Friendship. Austin Dabney and the Harris family. Don't have a painting of Austin Dabney, but Austin Dabney was a Georgia slave from Wilkes County who fought alongside the Patriots during the Battle of Kettle Creek. Some people think it's the Battle of Augusta. But he served in place of his master, Richard Aycock, as a substitute. He served as an artilleryman under Elijah Clark. Well, he was shot through the thigh, and Giles Harris was a white soldier who lived in the area. He cared for Austin Dabney in his home, and this really close bond formed between Dabney and the Harris family, and it went through generations. Because of his bravery in battle, Georgia's General Assembly paid for his freedom from his former master and gave him 250 acres of land in 1786. So we're going to see another friendship here. Okay, go into our virtual vault. If you go into our virtual vault, type in Austin Dabney and you'll get information up here. Right here we have, of course, we have the originals, but they've been scanned and in the virtual vault. This right here is an act emancipating Austin Dabney. So you can go in there and you can read that. You can actually see it. Here we have another part of that act. Go in the virtual vault thing, what we call the ad hoc collection. As we said, 250 acres, he was granted 250 acres of land in Washington County. Austin Dabney was the only African-American awarded a land grant in Georgia for Revolutionary War service. And let's kind of look at this a little bit better here. We have the original, but a lot of our originals have been scanned so that you can see them from the comfort of your home. Here you have it right here. Entitled to 250 acres of land. Well, let's go on with the story here. The relationship between the Dabney and Harris family continued. For the rest of Dabney's life, he followed them to Walton, Burke, and Pike counties. He worked for and supported the Harris family, sending his friend Giles Harris's son, William, to Franklin College. Dabney continued to support William financially while he successfully studied for the bar with attorney Stephen Upson. Upson County is named for Stephen Upson. In 1835, William Harris named his son Austin Dabney. And in this collection, this is a collection we have, there's the signature Austin D. Harris right there, in the Harris family. Let's go on. Because Dabney was African-American, that precluded him from participating in any of the Georgia land lotteries of the early 1800s. However, the Harris family in Austin had a friend in high places, Stephen Upson, state legislature. He supported Dabney's cause and sponsored a resolution to provide him with additional land not distributed in the lottery. So he received 112 acres in Walton County. Stephen Upson died in 1824. So that's a good friend to have. At his death in Zebulon and Pike County in 1830, Austin Dabney left all his land and property to William Harris and was buried in the Harris family plot in Pike County. In 2010, with the cooperation of the Harris family, the Sons of the American Revolution held a dedication ceremony to unveil a new tombstone for Dabney and to mark the opening of the site to the public. Now there is an app, I actually have this app on my phone. It's called the Pike County app, free like apps are. Pike Pathways, and I have a picture right here. This is what it looks like. You see right here on there, this is Pike Pathways, their app. You can click on Austin Dabney and it'll show you where he's buried. So if you're ever in Pike County, go out and visit his grave. Just download the app. In addition to the 2 land grants, he also received a federal invalid pension of $60 a year, starting in 1739, which increased to $96 annually. And if you're like me, you read these numbers in history and you think, what is that today? I love the inflation calendar, so go on the inflation calendar. And the $60 in 1789 would be $1,852.47 in 2021. And $96 in 1789 is $2,963.96 in 2021. So where to find information on Austin Dabney? Virtual Vault. Go on our website, click on the Virtual Vault, put his name in, and we have this information coming up. And there's actually a lot of information online on him. Let's fast forward through time, through Georgia history time. Family letters, World War I. Connection in time of war. During times of war, a lot of letters go back and forth. There's that connection. Let's see the connection to Georgia. This is actually, I have to say, one of my favorite collections that we have here, World War I. And you will see why. The Robert Gerber Burton collection. On the right, you see Robert Gerber Burton in World War I. This collection consists primarily of letters written from Burton to his mother, father, aunt, and brother. And for this presentation, we're just going to go into those in World War I, where he was Company A, 151st Machine Gun Battalion. Let me tell you the end of it, he does not die in World War I, so he's okay, he goes on. This is a letter, let me go back a second. This collection was donated to the archives from the Historical Society of the National Guard of Georgia. And within what's called a finding aid that basically tells you what's in the collection, there are some summaries. This is fast. I just love him. Okay, August 2nd, 1918. Mother dearest. He's always thinking about his mother. I know that you've been worried because you haven't heard from me. But mother, I have been a pretty busy man for the last month and a half. Now that's an understatement, but I'm still all in one piece, so he's kind of making her feel good. Let's go on. Now listen, I have been wounded, but not seriously so. So when you see my name on the casualty list, don't think anything about it, for I'm all okay. I'm in the hospital now, I'm well cared for, I'm well fed, and not feeling the least bit bad. Isn't he a good son? Then he goes into the story. You can almost picture him. He's like picturing his mother there. Now sit down, listen, let me tell you all about it. We were going over the top, and over the top means going over the trenches. And I was advancing my squad, and I was just going to advance again when something picked me up and set me down about 3 feet from where I was. I didn't feel anything special pain at the time, so I advanced my squad about 150 yards further along. I then began to feel a sharp pain in my right arm, but I looked and didn't see any blood. And then I began to feel I had a hole in my coat, and I saw a bullet sticking about halfway through my coat. It had gone through the fleshy part of my arm, through the Bible that Auntie sent me, and it stopped there. The Bible was all that kept it from going all the way through. I love that story. Would you like to see the Bible? Well, I'm going to show you the Bible. Well, let me end this first, and I'm going to show it to you. Now, Mama, he ends this. Don't worry the least bit about me. I should be ready to go back to the company in a few days. Just keep sending my mail to the old address. You see this a lot in a lot of the letters where those who are fighting in terrible, terrible conditions don't want to worry family at home. But there's this wonderful connection. There you go. I'm going to do a close-up in a little bit. There's the Bible. It's just like a pocket Bible. I know you can't see that, so here we go. See the bullet right there? Saved from a bullet by his Bible. I love that story. That is actually the original letters that he was writing on. Now this is fun, talking about the connections, wanting the connections to home. The Walton Tribune, he wrote an article, a letter to the editor, and he's giving these tips for the boys over there, and I absolutely love this. Tips for boys coming over here. Take as many baths as you can before you come over, as you sure will need them. Take one a day for 52 days, and then you will be very well fixed for a year at least. Then this is another bon. Bon is good in French. Corner the market on insect powder. This is very important. Then he talks about chocolate. Buy all the chocolate up. Fill your pockets full of it. Be sure and bring a supply. And you have to leave a blanket out, do it. And he's talking about cards. By the way, another thing that the boys coming over will need a deck of cards, or at least, and better still, several decks of cards. Now, please don't think about gambling and whiskey and jails and murders in connection with the deck of cards, because they are seldom used for that. I love it that this is seldom used for that. Solitaire is a great pastime with we doughboys and machine gunners. Remember, this is a machine gunner. Especially when we're off duty, put a deck up each sleeve and under your hat, a deck apiece in your shoes, and any other place that can be thought of. So there's that connection with his hometown, wanting that connection during World War I. This is kind of interesting. He ends it by this. Since being over here, we've learned a whole lot about war. We thought at first that we knew all there was to know about the business of fighting. We had a rude awakening. The boys at home have the advantage of us, as they were trained before to a certain extent they came over. So this is almost saying like he wasn't trained. What did we know about grenades? Nothing. But we do now. There is one kind that is used to pop a little cap on, but don't hold it over 5 seconds. If you do, there ain't a doctor in the world that can do you any good. So as soon as you pop the cap, heave it like a baseball and then duck. So that's kind of fun. That was in his article. This right here, if you come in, this is a finding aid. Some finding aids are larger than others, and you can basically see what is it that you want to see. This is a summary of letters from the finding aid. This is to his aunt. At the very end, I sort of like this. He commends the Salvation Army over in France, and he tells how the lasses are right up there in the general battle area. I've not heard that before. To cook hot cakes and serve them with syrup and coffee free of charge. They're doing as great as the YMCA. So if you're interested in, say, World War I, really to get into this, to look at these collections, these primary sources. This one is after the armistice, and at the end he's talking about people in Germany continue to treat them nice. The further they go into the country, the more effects of war and the less people have to eat. Papers don't lie about conditions. They live off potatoes and plenty of bread. So this right here, you have a Purple Heart and other items in this collection. You won't get this with all collections, but in this one we do. This is something he would not have shown his mother, because it says a peaceful night in the border. He had it with his things. And you can see this drawing, a peaceful night rest on the border, and you see that snake coming in there. He wouldn't have wanted to worry his mother. This is actually one of my favorite pictures. This is in his collection. All that was said on the back was Frisky. The dog's name is Frisky. We're talking about family and friends. Well, this is the furry family. Dogs were used as well as other animals in World War I. They were used as guard dogs. They were used as there were lots of rats in the trenches. We won't get into this. Nasty big ones. Sentry dogs, scout dogs. They went with foot patrols to pick up enemy scent, casualty mercy dogs, messenger dogs, mascots. So Frisky was there with him. In this collection, I just thought I'd bring this out. It just tells where he fought. And on his discharge, his character was excellent. He went back on the USS Minnesota. I just thought I'd put that in because it's kind of a nice picture. How do you find these manuscripts, these collections? On our website, go in the book and manuscript catalog. You'll see books that we have in the library, the reference library, and you'll also see collections. Other World War I letters. Here we go, the Doughty family collection. These are letters between Daniel Doughty and his wife Wilhelmina. I'm going to use Wilhelmina's. This has been transcribed. This is to her husband, who's at war. I'm going to take a part of it next. See if this sounds familiar to us right now. It's talking about the Spanish flu. The Spanish influenza, or just flu as it is called, has become a very serious thing and is very nearly all over the US now, and in many cities and towns. It is an epidemic. It is quite serious here. This week, all schools, movies, churches, theatres, etc. have been closed for 2 months or more, and there are to be no meetings or public gatherings of any kind, and all cars and autos are to have all windows and doors open except for a rainstorm. This right here is the original letter. I'm going to scan the letter right there. This is another collection of Theodore K. Jones. And you see right here, he has diaries in this collection, which would be really fascinating to read. But right here, you also have a gas mask, a gas notebook, and concerning the use and effects of gas, right to the right there. Okay, forward in time. How Georgia benefited from the New Deal. FDR, Warm Springs, friends and connections in the New Deal. This right, I've read a lot of books on FDR, and some of the information that I have comes from this book. It's really good. It's got great pictures in, lots of good information. I might have read it like that. Kay Lanning Minshew wrote this, and I do highly recommend it. There are lots of good books on FDR. So, FDR and Alice Lou Pastridge. She is somebody new. I have not actually heard of her before. FDR, as many of you know, he contracted polio in 1921. He was 39. He became the 32nd president of the United States, and he was looking for some way to walk again. In 1924, through a friend, he discovered Warm Springs. He actually visited from 1924 to 1945 Warm Springs 41 times. So who Alice Lou Pastridge is, or was, she was an experienced physical therapist in the field of polio, and she'd been treating FDR when he began visiting Warm Springs for the warm thermal spring waters. FDR invested a great deal of his personal money to purchase Warm Springs and started the Georgia Warm Springs Foundation. Due to our efforts, walking with crutches became much easier for Roosevelt. You can see why this is important. She eventually became the director of physiotherapy at Warm Springs. It was vital, the work that she worked with them. FDR learned how to walk in crutches and then holding on to somebody or something with one hand. This is not from our collection, but I love this picture. This is actually from the National Archives. Whenever you're researching, you may use lots and lots of different archives to get the whole picture. I love this picture of him. He's smiling, he's happy. That's who he was. He was just happiest when he was at Warm Springs. We have a collection, Warm Springs Foundation, Alice Lou Pastridge correspondence. In this foundation, there was this. This is How to Walk with Crutches. It's from 1926, copyright. What is important about this? The illusion of walking was very important for a leader. FDR knew this. FDR wanted to portray strength, and he began with crutches, and in time he developed a halting gait that involved braces, a cane, and leaning with the appearance of casual affection on the arm of his adult sons or others. Alice Lou Pastridge helped FDR with this illusion. It looked like he could walk. That's just in her collection, it's a certificate. This is in the Yamacraw Ball collection, in our collection, the virtual vault. Take a look at his hand. He is holding on, he's saying, this is 1931 Warm Springs, I'll be back in the fall if we don't have a war, and is waving to warm wishes. I like this one. This is, Roosevelt could drive a car with hand controls. He is leaving Warm Springs here. He loved driving. Sometimes he would drive around Middle Georgia getting to know people. And that affected the New Deal. We have a book in our library, it's called Hiya Neighbor, and it's the way FDR presented himself to people around Georgia, particularly Middle Georgia. Very charismatic, he cared about people, and he saw what was going on in Georgia. It was a very difficult time for Georgia. The 20s, and of course for everyone in the 30s. So he was able to get a glimpse and have this communication with the people in Georgia, and he took his car out. This right here is perfect of FDR, Hiya Neighbor. Where do we find information? Book and manuscript catalog, that's where you can find that book. Also right here, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, 1932, when he was elected. He was seen as a son of Georgia, another home. People here loved him. The New Deal in Georgia. It's 1932, he's elected president. He's sworn in. The 3 R's, relief, recovery, reform. This is the Depression. Plan to end the Great Depression, he had all sorts of plans, give jobs to the unemployed, pave the way for the recovery for different programs, the Rural Electrification Administration. His idea was from Georgia. Georgia's electric bill was 4 times that of his bill from New York. From his driving around also Middle Georgia, he saw a need for electricity for the interaction in the rural areas. What do we have? The REA, from his experiences here in Georgia, from the connections with people. His FDR, this is in a Yamacraw Ball collection. It's Thanksgiving. See how happy he is, he's just happy. People loved him. Where to find information? Virtual vault. Understanding. Okay, let's go forward just a little bit. World War II years and the GI Bill using newspapers. All right, FDR on June the 22nd, 1944, signed the GI Bill. What does this have to do with Georgia? Just kind of remind you a little bit about the GI Bill. Just zip through this really fast. Opportunity of resuming their education or technical training. He got the idea for this too from driving around Georgia and seeing how needed education was. Provision for loans for the returning GIs, for homes, farms, business properties, reasonable unemployment allowances for up to a week, for veterans who couldn't find a job. It improved job counseling, hospital facilities, strengthened the VA. The GI Bill almost died and never became a law. And this was during D-Day. The American Legion and the race to save the GI Bill. What does this have to do with Georgia? Well, this is a source. We've been looking into collections. This is a source that you can use. The Atlanta Constitution, we have this down, says on-site use only, courtesy of the R.J. Taylor Jr. Foundation. You can search the Atlanta Constitution from 1868 to 1984, put in a term, and so much information comes up. This is where this story came from. I was researching something, and I happened to see this again. I've never heard of this before. A Georgian saved the GI Bill. It's a great story. So this is Congressman John S. Gibson. He received word that the GI Bill, was in danger. It was in jeopardy. He'd been sick and he'd come home, but he'd given authority to cast his vote in favor of the bill to Representative John Rankin of Mississippi. So it was at a committee. You had 6 attending representatives of the House, and they were evenly split, 3 for, 3 against. Rankin was supposed to, he was a proxy for John S. Gibson, Congressman Gibson. He refused to cast his vote. If that would have happened, the GI Bill would have been dead in the water. So what happens? They had to find him. They had to get him back to Washington. So with the radio and the newspapers, it was a dark and stormy night. Do you hear about that? This was a stormy night in southern Georgia. And US Representative John S. Gibson was rushed by a police motorcycle escort from his hometown of Douglas to Jacksonville, Florida. A plane awaited him, a dramatic overnight journey arranged by the American Legion changed the course of US history. Don't you? A lot of people don't know about this. I didn't know about this. It was a Georgian that did this. So he flew off to Washington, D.C., arriving just in time to cast his vote to break the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, GI Bill, out of a conference committee deadlock on June the 10th, 1944. The final day the lawmakers would meet about it. So this is from the Atlanta Constitution. You can go on there, you can search whatever you want. It really goes into more detail. We also have microfilm, the Atlanta Constitution, 1868 to 2001, the Atlanta Journal, 1883 to 2001, the Atlanta Journal Constitution, 2001 to 2013, if you're interested in this. So what we have done, we've gone into friendships, we have gone into families, and the part the Georgians played in history. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And while you are thinking about that, let me tell you the times that we are open. The Georgia Archives is open Tuesdays through Saturdays, 9 to 12. We close for lunch, and then we're open from 1 to 4. 5800 Jonesboro Road, Morrow, Georgia. So come in and look at some of these collections that we talked about. We're very happy to help you. And if you have any questions, I'm here. Do we have anything right now?
Nothing at the moment. We still have 12 attendees.
Okay. Well, while I'm waiting, if you have any questions, I'll wait for a few minutes. Let me tell you about what's coming up. August Lunch and Learn on Friday, August the 13th, noon to 1 p.m. The Georgia Archives Lunch and Learn live event will be available to the public through Microsoft Teams, which is this. The Memory Lab will be presented by Muriel M. Jackson, Genealogy Librarian Archivist, Genealogical and Historical Room, Middle Georgia Regional Library, that's Washington Memorial Library in Macon. As this will be, August Lunch and Learn will be available on our YouTube channel, the Georgia Archives. So just plug in Georgia Archives on YouTube channel. We have all sorts of interesting videos for you to look at.
The Bramlett said, thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Oh, you are very welcome. Well, I am glad that you came, and we virtually, and please come and visit us in person. All sorts of great material, and we will see you virtually again in August. Bye.